as we go along. So what I like to think is that every moment of uh, of class is a chance to learn. And today we learned that you always back everything up to the cloud. Okay. Back everything up to the cloud, and then you can download it onto a different computer, because right now my presentation is stuck on my other work computer, and I'll have to use an older PowerPoint that I used for a couple semesters ago. But we should be able to go through it, and because of that, we'll get through. And as Liam forcefully got out of me by rising up, you guys are going to get bonus points this week for showing up to class. So yay. Another reason is that
Good job, Liam.
Good job. Another reason that things are kind of hectic is because I am 2 hours ahead of you guys, and it is 9:30 here. So I am loopy. The whole time change still hasn't, is just playing with my mind right now. So let me go ahead and get started, and we'll get done. Boom. There you go. All right. PowerPoint's back up. Internet's back up. Fingers crossed. Let's do this. Okay. So a couple real quick things about the other ones. The American Revolution is one that could not have really succeeded without the intervention of outside forces. One of those outside forces being France. And what's funny is that pretty soon after that, the French also go through a revolution, a much bloodier revolution. And that's because the fact that those in charge have held everyone down so much. Remember, this absolute monarch had control over everything. Unfortunately, this absolute monarch squeezed a little bit too hard. There's only so much blood you can get out of a stone, and then pretty much you're just squeezing on a rock.
Let them eat cake.
What's that?
Let them eat cake.
Yes, let them eat cake. Has anybody seen the newest movie about Marie Antoinette, the one that was directed by, I think, Francis Ford Coppola's daughter, Sofia Coppola? That's her name. It's actually a pretty good movie. It's a pretty good movie, a nice little modern spin on it, and basically the aristocracy in France were so disconnected from the commoner that they had no clue onto what they were doing to the commoner. And so when the commoners rise up, it's this sort of, oh my God, what is happening? Why is this happening? What is this thing? And so they flee, or most of them, not the king and queen. They were forced to stay. A lot of them flee to Austria and Prussia, and then they come back to try to take back France. And this galvanizes the French against the aristocracy, and it leads to the rise of the reign of terror, because they're able to because the revolutionaries are able to use this. Well, look at the rich people. They went, grabbed some mercenaries, and tried to come back and kill us all. And so they're able to use that idea to really gain power. And once they gain power, they use some sweeping motions, or they pass some sweeping motions that change France forever. The absolute monarchy is gone. You have a constitutional monarchy for a split second, and then the king and queen are executed, and you have the rise of a very proto-communist assembly type system. And that leads to changes even further into the French holdings. And one of those places that changes very quickly is Haiti. Now, Haiti is a very important strategical location for the French for the French nation. The French citizens don't really know too much about Haiti unless they move out there, but they know that this is where they get a lot of their goods and a lot of their a lot of resources from. And hold on, forget to go to chat. So Haiti is in and of itself a strategical outpost for the French. It was part of the Spanish holding for a while, and then the French were able to come in and take half of the island. The Dominican Republic and Haiti make up the island of Hispaniola, and by the 1780s, Haiti is the western half of Hispaniola, and the Dominican Republic, or Dominica, at that point is under Spanish control. So you have this part under French rule. And because you have it under French rule, and because it was at one point a Spanish holding, you have that very strong caste system that I've talked about before, or that I talked about last time. This caste system where it's all based on race, right? This caste system is one that people can't really move through because of the fact that everything is based on race. So if you are Black, you are down near at the bottom. And this basically leads to the beginning of Black slaves resenting greatly the French colonists, and then pretty soon the slaves begin to outnumber the colonists. The slaves begin to be much more numerous, and you start seeing clashes pretty soon between colonists and slaves. So you have this strong slave system, a strong caste system, and this strong caste system even moves towards free Black citizens, because there were free Black citizens in France and in Haiti at the time. If you guys have ever read, let's see, The Count of Monte Cristo, The Man in the Iron Mask, The Three Musketeers, any of those books, they were actually written by an French African writer, Alexander Dumas. He was actually half African, was it half Caribbean African, I believe is what it is. Afro-Caribbean, there it is. I was going to get that eventually. Half Afro-Caribbean and half white. And so there are a lot of mestizo, a lot of mulattoes, a lot of mixed people in the French Caribbean colonies, but these people are very heartily discriminated against, and so you start seeing them really begin to be really angry, especially since free Blacks were educated at the time. They were some of the more well-read. They were some of the more well-learned individuals, and that's because of this caste system. Because the only way that they could actually improve themselves was through education. The only way they could do things was through learning the law, learning the culture, being as French as possible. You know, if you are in a caste system, you have to show yourself to be part of the greater culture, and that's what Afro-Caribbean people had to do. That's what the free Haitians had to do. And so they were pretty angry. They felt that they were stifled completely because of this racist system. And then comes the French Revolution in 1789. The French Revolution, even more so than the American Revolution, really changes Haiti completely. The Haitians had known about the American Revolution and the ideas of freedom, equality, et cetera, but the free, especially the free blacks in Haiti saw that, well, the Americans didn't free their slaves, so how free can they actually be? How much could they actually be fighting for these Enlightenment ideals? And so when the French Revolution happened in 1789, the free Africans and the slave Africans are all basically saying, well, here is a chance to put Enlightenment thought into power, into play. Both free blacks and slaves have heard of the revolutionary thoughts. All of them have been exposed to Enlightenment ideals. Slaves in French Haiti and even in Spanish Haiti had a higher literacy rate than in the North American colonies. They also had a high intermingling rate, which means that slaves in Haiti and even in the Dominican Republic would move from plantation to plantation much more freely. They weren't as loosely regulated. Their slavery wasn't as loosely regulated until later on. So they had spread these thoughts, they had spread these ideas, and now it was a chance to show that freedom and equality can be applied to all. Okay, this isn't just an ideal that's out there in the ether. This is an ideal now that can be attainable to everyone. And they began to meet and they began to say, well, they should apply to all. And then the French pretty much ignore Haiti. France is having their revolution. They don't have time to deal with Haiti. And so Haitians are patiently waiting for any sort of action from the government, and nothing comes. And so by 1791, you have a slave rebellion. And this is a very highly effective revolt. The slaves have been there for generations. Remember, it used to be under Spain. So they have been there longer than a lot of the French colonists. And so they know the island inside and out. They know exactly what to do. And then also they are led by a very good leader, just like Marquis de Lafayette, just like in Ming, China. You have a poor, uneducated leader that actually comes up and turns this army of rebels into a very powerful standing army. And this, you have this under Toussaint Louverture, who comes and turns the army of rebels into a fighting force that takes it to the French army stationed in Haiti and begins to defeat them. And by 1792, slaves are going to control a third of Haiti. So within a year, they have taken control of 1/3 of the entire country of Haiti. And so they are continuing to gain land, gain more strategic areas. And then in 1793, you have the French and British fighting against one another. And the British and the French war is actually going to also take place in their holdings in the Caribbean. And the British are going to oftentimes lose crates of munitions in the jungles of Haiti. They will just leave weapons lying around and come back the next day and, oh my goodness, our weapons are gone. Yep. And so the rebels are going to, this is an unofficial way of helping the rebels. Instead of because if they were to officially help the rebels, they might actually then have to accept Haiti as a sovereign nation once if they were able to gain independence. But the British don't really want that. The British just want to mess with the French. And actually, I don't know if we'll get to this by the end of the semester, but during the Cuban Revolution, American forces used to leave boxes of ammunition and guns by outside of the fence in Guantanamo Bay, and the guerrilla rebels of Cuba under Fidel Castro would grab those weapons and take them to fight against I forget his name, but against the government at the time, because Castro wasn't our friend. So I'll just leave that there, and hopefully we'll get to that era at the end of the semester. But this is a great way for unofficial help against your enemies. You know, an enemy of my enemy is my friend, sort of thing. And so the British are going to supply weapons to the rebels. And then and Spain is going to have this big idea, like, oh, we can go ahead and invade their island. Spain is in control of the Dominican Republic and decides to invade the Caribbean islands. And this actually is a point where, when Spain invades the island, like I said, this was an old one. The French forces are going to have to divert their attention to that. So in one way, you could see that Spain invading would actually help the rebels, because they would be able to take out the French with the Spanish help. Except that in 1794, Robespierre is going to outlaw slavery in all French lands, even their colonial holdings. As crazy as Robespierre was, he was a true believer, with a capital T and a capital B. He was a true believer of the Enlightenment ideals. And so he outlawed slavery everywhere. And once that proclamation is read to Toussaint Louverture and the Haitian forces, they join with the French. Like, okay, then we will work together with you to get rid of the Spanish. And that's what they do. Louverture and the French army join together and get rid of the Spanish. So you have the French forces fighting against the Haitians. The British help the Haitians out, and then here comes the Spanish, just trudging over everything, and they mess things up, and then the Haitians join up with the French forces. Oops. Okay, sorry. And they are able to expel the Spanish. So this leads to some tumultuous times, because in 1794 you're going to have the expelling of the Spanish, and from basically 1794 to 1799, France is going to be in all sorts of turmoil until Napoleon takes charge in 1799 and begins to reform the French government, reform the French economy, reform basically France from the ground up. And in the meantime, you have the Haitians starting to set up their own government. And in 1801, Toussaint Louverture issues a constitution. Toussaint Louverture decides that, you know, they've spent enough time as a nation without any sort of colonial power over them, and it's time to officially issue a constitution and officially declare themselves a free state. And he issues a constitution, but here he appoints himself as governor for life. And a lot of his people don't like that. And the reason he says this, that he does this, is because, he wants to guide Haiti through the next few decades. He says that he needs to be there. He's not proclaiming himself president. He's not proclaiming himself emperor. He's just the governor. And he will work with whatever parliamentary forces there, and a lot of his former allies, or a lot of his allies, become former allies. As they say, this is overstepping your bounds. You are now the enemy that we tried to get rid of. And then in 1801, Napoleon finally, having stabilized France, decides that, basically says, who are these people that think that they can leave our control? And so Napoleon sends an army, and the person that he sends into Haiti is actually Charles Leclerc, who is his brother-in-law. So he sends his brother-in-law out to do his dirty work. And Charles Leclerc basically is assessed to the situation and tells Louverture's allies that you have the beginnings of a tyrant. Ally yourself with me. We'll get rid of Louverture, and we will begin to find ways for France and Haiti to work in peace. And so a lot of Louverture's allies begin to go to de Klerk, because de Klerk brings with them this reassurance from Napoleon that they will work things out. And as Louverture fights against Leclerc and his former allies, he's actually asked, Leclerc says, you can join us again, come and meet with us, and we will discuss ways that we can end this battle peacefully. We'll find ways that France can uphold its ideals of freedom and equality, but you will still be under the French crown. And Louverture says, you know what, I will go ahead and listen. I'll come in and listen to what you have to say and see if I want to do that. And he agrees to come in, and he's actually arrested under a white flag. Louverture comes to meet with Leclerc, and he's arrested and sent back to France, where he dies in prison. Louverture, trusting Leclerc, coming in under a white flag, a flag of peace. This actually causes all of his old allies to break away with Leclerc. It's one thing to fight against one another, as we have been doing, but it's another thing to under false pretenses bring in this great man. And so Louverture's former allies break with Leclerc and begin to fight, and the fight goes on throughout the year, and the French aren't really ready for what's happening in as far as the weather, as far as the diseases that are there. And pretty soon, most of the French army are going to die of yellow fever. They're going to catch yellow fever, and they're going to die of this. Basically, the yellow fever shuts down your kidneys, liver. Jaundice sets in, and you turn yellow. You lose all energy. Pretty soon, your own bodily functions fail you. And this is kind of a fitting end, because even Leclerc himself dies of yellow fever. This is kind of a fitting end for someone that broke those unspoken rules of military combat. You don't fire upon anyone. You don't arrest anyone that is under a flag of truce. And he did so, and because of this, the French army is devastated, and Leclerc himself dies, and Napoleon's outwon brother-in-law and has to explain why. So most of the French army will die, and in 1804, and here you will have Haiti actually gaining their independence. A new leader will rise, Jean-Jacques Dessalines. And Jean-Jacques Dessalines is a lot more hardcore of a soldier. He's very opportunistic. He allied himself with de Klerk, and then he was one of those that defected and took power. And Jean-Jacques Dessalines was was in the mold of like a Robespierre, in the mold of somebody that really felt and really believed in his cause. And his cause was that of a Haiti that was independent and that was free of all white citizens. And this would be a new nation that was entirely African. It was a society that could show the rest of the world, the rest of the European world, that Afro-Caribbean people could rule and govern just as quickly or just as easily, and they could set up a government just as quickly as anyone else. And so he tells all of the white colonists, you have up until this certain day to leave. And if you don't leave, you will be removed. And a lot of the colonists, to their credit, had never known any other life. This is where they had lived for all or most of their lives. And so a lot of them refused. A lot of them really refused to give up their life. A lot of them refused to give up the way of life that they had known for so long. And so Dessalines says, well, I warned you. And he orders what's known as the Haitian Massacre. And in the Haitian Massacre, you have Dessalines ordering African soldiers, former African slaves, to murder and to forcibly remove anyone that didn't want to that had decided to stay, burning down their houses, killing, doing everything I could to get rid of the colonists. And after ordering this massacre, he really loses a lot of the respect of his men. And pretty soon after this, he's going to be assassinated in 1806. And after his assassination, you will see the rise of more of these Afro-Caribbean soldier politicians, such as Alexander Sabé Petillon and Henri Christophe. And both of these men will have a differing view of how Haiti should be ruled. Alexander Sabé Petillon believes that there should be a much more free Haiti. And Henri Christophe believes in the idea of an absolute monarch, of a strong government, of a strong governor. And so instead of continuing to fight against one another, what you're going to see is that that Henri Christophe and Petillon decide to split the country in two then. And in the north, you have the Republic of Haiti under Petillon. And the Republic of Haiti will have a democratic government, will have a government that is much more free. And in the southern half, you will have the state of Haiti under Henri Christophe, one that is a much more, he's not a monarch, so he's basically a one of those, the beginnings of the idea of the generalissimo that you'll see in South America and in the Caribbean as well. So you'll have a much more, I wouldn't so far as call him a dictator, but he's getting towards the dictator territory. And so both of these nations exist for a while, but the state of Haiti is the one that's going to um, end up failing first and foremost. It will last for only a little over a decade, while the Republic of Haiti will continue for much longer. After the fall of the state of Haiti, you will see the rise of the Republic of Haiti, and pretty soon you will have the reunification of Hispaniola, where you have the state of Haiti, the Republic of Haiti, and the Dominican Republic all under one flag. And this will last for a couple of decades. So Hispaniola will be under one flag, mainly by the Republic of Haiti. And so some of the major fallout of this is not only that you have Hispaniola under one unified flag. You also have the fallout that Napoleon gives up his New World aspirations, which leads to the Louisiana Purchase. And Napoleon, pretty much in 1801, starts to see, he sends de Klerk out to Haiti, and he expects a very quick turnaround. He expects Leclerc to take over, bring Haiti back under the French control, and begin to trade sugar cane and tobacco back with France in order to make more money. Instead, it's much harder than he thought. And he sees all the land that he has in the New World, and he sees all the debts that France is in now. And he has aspirations to control basically all of Europe. And so, taking everything into consideration, he says, okay, this is way too much for France to handle. We are going to give up all of this land. Let's see if the Americans want it. And Thomas Jefferson buys the entirety of the Midwest, basically. And if I had my current PowerPoint, I would have the picture up. But the Louisiana Purchase basically is France giving up on having American colonial holdings. And part of this reason is because of the Haitian Revolution. Because of the fact that Haiti even Haiti was harder than he wanted to and more costly than he wanted. So imagine if he were to have set up colonies in the New World and they split away. How much money is France willing to spend on reining in wayward colonies? How much of that is going to take money away from his ultimate goal of gaining power and gaining control of Europe? So Napoleon gives up all of his New World aspirations, partly because of the Haitian Revolution. The main fallout that I see, that I've studied, is that the slave revolts are going to frighten whites, especially in England and in the Americas. This is going to be one of the things that ends up leading to England outlawing the slave trade. This bloody massacre that happens in Haiti, this revolution that happens, England is already moving towards abolition. And this is just another reason to do so. England has a religious reason for getting rid of slavery. They also have an economic reason. But now you see that there is this chance of rebellion. There's this chance of war, and so England will move towards outlawing the slave trade, and pretty soon are going to outlaw slavery outright. In the American colonies, you're going to see the South be very, very afraid of what this means. You're going to see the South begin to treat their slaves much more harshly. Before things like the rise of the abolitionist movement, and very very soon after the Haitian Revolution, you have in the southern states, southern colonies, and then southern states, the you have the tightening of slave laws. Before this, slaves could move around from place to place with more freedom. They could buy themselves out of slavery. They could read. They could learn to read. They could learn to write as well. But after this, you start seeing much harsher slave laws. These slave laws are going to be what abolitionists see in the American South. If abolitionists that begin to actually write about what is happening in the South are going to be moved by these harsh slave laws. So without this, without this rebellion, you don't see the decline of slavery as a moral and as being morally okay, as being something that's just something that colonial powers have to do. Instead, you start seeing England getting rid of it and the South really cracking down, and this will eventually lead to the Civil War. Unfortunately, for Haiti, it is alienated from the rest of the world. The U.S., especially under pressure by southern states, embargoes the island nation, so they refuse to deal with anyone that trades freely with Haiti. And at this point, European powers are very much at the mercy of the American colonies, because they're such great trade partners. And so Haiti has a lot of natural resources, but can't trade with Europe freely, and so they can't really grow and create a strong economy. And pretty soon you're going to start seeing things like the reunification begin to crumble. You're going to start seeing the rise of dictators. You're going to start seeing the nation basically spinning its wheels and never really growing. So Haiti, I like to look at Haiti, at the Haitian Revolution, as something that is very unique. It is a slave revolt that grows into its own nation. It is a slave revolt that in some way changes the course of world events by being something that forces Napoleon to give up his aspiration, by forcing countries to look at the way that they deal with slavery. It really changes the world. It moves the world into the track that we see it. Who knows what would have happened if Napoleon had decided to stay in the Americas and create colonies? You probably would have seen a war between France and the American colonies in some way. You probably would have seen England probably joining forces again with the Americans. You probably would have seen a much bigger, harsher war during the Napoleonic era. Maybe Napoleon doesn't decide to invade Russia because he's dealing with the Americas. There's a lot of things that could have changed here if it not been for the Haitian Revolution. And in the saddest way is that the Haitian Revolution was basically never given the chance to succeed. because it was a small nation, because of leaders that didn't really that weren't really willing to work with one another, and because Americans definitely stunted their growth. So I just like to bring up Haiti in the revolution courses because it is a very interesting revolution that people don't really hear about too much in any of their history courses throughout their career. Does anyone have any questions about this before we go to the next? Before we go to the Mexican Revolution, or sorry, Mexican War for Independence. There's a War for Independence and the Revolution, and the Civil War, and the other one. So, all right, let's move on. Oops, like I said, this is an old one. Where am I? No questions. Okay. Aha. Here we go. Come on. There we go. Oops. Mm-hmm. Aha, found you. Okay, here we go. Mexican War for Independence. So the Mexican War for Independence is something I think that is important to note, especially those of us, especially for all of us here living in the American Southwest that was once a part of Mexico. Those of us that have Mexican roots, those of us that know people with Mexican roots. It's an important to know how Mexico comes to be, and how the colonial Spanish system sort of shapes the way Mexico becomes. I talked about last time how the Spanish colonies were gripped very tight by the Spanish government, much more so than the North American colonies. The Mexican viceroyalty was one that had a lot more mestizos, a lot more mulattoes, a lot more a lot more of those castes that you see, more so than the Caribbean, more so than in South America. And so because of this, you have a system that really doesn't work for most people. The Spanish viceroyalty system is set up so that Spain benefits, and then after that, the pure white colonists, and then the mixed colonists, and finally down at the bottom, the Native Americans and African slaves are going to be the most put upon of these colonists. And because of this, you're going to see this war actually play out in different phases. The thing about the Mexican Revolution, the thing about the Mexican War for Independence is that Mexico does indeed gain independence, but does it really change? You've looked at all of these different revolutions. In the United States, the 13 colonies got rid of the monarch, but was anything actually changed? This is a question that I'm going to be asking for the discussion, because the monarch is in England, so the people that were in charge in the Americas are basically still kind of in charge. In France during that revolution, you had things change. You can definitely see things changing. because you went from a king to Napoleon as the emperor, but you still have basically a monarch in charge at the end. In Haiti, you see more of a change because you had a slave revolt that ended up becoming its independent nation. So some revolutions you see change, some revolutions you see more change than others. And in Mexico, you're going to see one where things sort of come full circle. And I'll explain as I go along. The first phase of the Mexican War for Independence is a populist uprising. Okay? Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla is actually a Criollo priest. And being a Criollo, that means that he is a full-blooded Spaniard, but he was born in the colonies. So he's not as quote unquote important as the Peninsulares. And so in that regard, having him lead this is not that surprising. What is surprising is his Grito de Dolores in 1810. This cry out basically says that the underclass must rise up against those oppressors. So this is an uprising of the people. So mestizos, mulattoes, coyotes, whatever sort of caste that you find yourselves in, los de atrás, no los conoce, all those different weird, multi-leveled castes that are in the Spanish colonies, get rid of that. This is the people rising up to create a government for the people. And so this is very revolutionary. So in 1810, this priest decides to gain followers and try to overthrow the government. And one of the first men that came under his sway was a soldier named Ignacio Allende. And Ignacio Allende, shown here with the flag of the Virgin of Guadalupe, decides that he will be a soldier for the people because he himself is a mestizo. And he begins to raise an army against the Spanish. Ignacio Allende is a soldier in the military, a good strategic leader, and he begins to gain a force. Unfortunately, at this point, the Spanish are going to crack down incredibly hard on them. And really, a lot of the people are not going to be for this revolution, mainly because those up top are going to say, like, no, we kind of like it up at the top. We don't want to be equal to all the riffraff. We don't need this equality stuff. And so the other criollos, peninsulares, those up at the very top are going to ally themselves with the Spanish crown and give money to the crown to raise an army. And this army will basically crush this first revolution very quickly. In 1811, Allende and Hidalgo are going to be captured and they're going to be executed by firing squad. And so this first revolution sort of fades away, but it's picked up by others. Jose Maria Morelos, a mestizo as well, takes up the banners of Hidalgo and Allende and declares himself the new leader. He declares himself the new presidente and begins to fight against the Spanish. But he himself would be defeated and executed in 1813. So this populist uprising, this uprising that has more in more in common with the French Revolution, where the people are going to rise up, the people are going to attack the nobility, the people are going to try to take over, ends in defeat by 1813. So really, it's just 3 years of revolution, 3 years of this radical this radical revolution that is going to completely change Mexico into something much more equal than it was. And that is very quickly snuffed out. But that's not the end of the revolution, of this war for independence. There is a second phase that happens after this. After Morelos is killed, you still have a fighting force. You still have rebels, and they begin guerrilla warfare. And you begin to have actually two armies rise up, one under Guadalupe Victoria and another under Vicente Guerrero. And these two armies, one in the north and one in the south, are going to begin to bring in more people and continue this revolutionary spirit. So the revolutionary spirit continues. The spirit of Hidalgo and Allende lives on in these two armies that are marching south towards Mexico City and north towards Mexico City. And so the viceroy is going to send an army to crush this insurrection. This army is going to be led by Agustín de Iturbide. And Agustín is going to be a very politically savvy individual. He's going to see that the people are beginning to be swayed by the ideas that Hidalgo talked about, the ideas of equality, the ideas of freedom, the ideas of no longer being under the Spanish crown. And he sees this. And then in 1812, Spain's government is actually overthrown. This is where Napoleon comes in. Napoleon comes in and takes over the Spanish crown. And Spain's government is overthrown. And all of a sudden, Agustín de Iturbide does not have anybody telling him what to do. He no longer has a boss bossing him around. And Iturbide sees a chance for independence. He sees that this is a place where Mexico could truly gain independence. And he sees that he needs to do this because this is the only way that he could stop these ideals. These ideals of creating a republic in Mexico, otherwise known as republicanism, of creating this strong republic that has a definite democratic bent. Iturbide is very much in favor of a strong central government. He's not so much in favor of the people controlling that government, however. He believes in the elite, and he believes the elite should take charge. And so he's going to take his army, he's going to begin a movement towards independence, and he's going to issue 3 guarantees. He's going to issue the guarantee of freedom from Spain, not full freedom, freedom from Spain. He's going to guarantee that religion will be important, Catholic religion, not other religions. And he's going to agree for unity, that all Mexicans will be equal in the eyes of the law. So you'll have freedom, religion, and unity. And all of these things come with an asterisk on them. Because it's not really freedom. It's not really a free religious state. And the equality of Mexicans will just be when it comes to law. It won't be economically, socially, or culturally. Basically, you will still have the people in charge remaining in charge. You'll just have the Spanish crown away. So yes, all people are equal, but some people are more equal than others. Very, very smart. And Iturbide is smart to use parts of Hidalgo's ideas, but sort of make sure that the status quo is not disturbed too much. He believes in some changes, but not too many changes. And this leads to the beginning of the first Mexican Empire. You have the Plan de Iguala that's going to unify the rebels and Iturbide's army. That leads to the Army of the Three Guarantees. And Iturbide's army and with the rebels, they're going to fight against the Spanish crown and begin to gain more territory into Mexico. And the battles will actually continue until 1821, especially after the downfall of Napoleon in 1815. The Spanish crown redoubles its efforts to gain back the forces that are trying to gain independence. But by 1821, you will have a victory over the Spanish. The rebels are going to enter Mexico City in September 28th, 1821, and begin the Treaty of Cordoba. And by September 16th, you will see a new independent Mexico. A new independent Mexico that's actually under Emperor Augustine I. During the Constitutional Convention, Augustine will actually make himself emperor, proving, as Brian says there, that some are more equal than others. Very similar to how Napoleon sort of subverts democratic ideals, puts himself in charge, and then puts that big giant crown on his head, saying that he's the emperor. And because of this, populist ideals will be stifled. But as you can see here, Augustine's reign will not be very long. He will reign as the emperor for less than a year before he will be assassinated. And so this sort of brings me to tying this one into the other revolutions as well. You have a populist what begins as a populist uprising, like the French Revolution. But in the end, a lot like the American Revolution, the only thing that's different now is that you have homegrown control. The crown is gone. What prompted the assassination? Basically, he became even more power mad, even after declaring himself emperor, and began to imprison people that he saw as enemies. And so his actual enemies assassinated him. So, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean that everyone's out to get you. Because they were definitely out to get him, but he deserved some of that. But yeah, the populist ideals are stifled, and so the only thing that's really different is that instead of having a monarchy in charge, you have the people that were in that they're basically second string have been promoted to first string. And so this Mexican government, in my opinion, doesn't really have much of a difference than when Spain was in charge. And in my opinion, the American colonies don't have too much of a difference. It's going to take a lot. It's going to take something drastic. In the case of the United States, it's the signing of the Constitution and creating a constitutional a federalist government under this constitution. In Mexico, it's going to be much longer and go until the Mexican Revolution that creates modern Mexico. But really, some revolutions are a lot more successful than others, and some revolutions are, yeah, JV team basically becomes a varsity team. Some revolutions are a lot more revolutionary than others. And so it's very, whenever we see this as the time of revolutions, we have to realize, well, not all of them created massive change. Some of them just created a little bit of change, and leave it at that. Now, I don't have much of these because I don't have my new presentation, but I'll go ahead and go over the South American ones. This is where I feel bad because I had a lot more. So while Napoleon is taking over Spain, while Spain is having issues with their governments, you have the South American colonies also beginning to break away. Mexico breaks away in 1810, and they're the second one after what would become Bolivia. Argentina is pretty much at the same time as Mexico. Chile is a little after, then Uruguay, Paraguay, Venezuela, Peru, Colombia, and Ecuador, and then Brazil at that point is Portuguese, but I like to include them here as well. So look at all of these different colonies that begin to break away within a 20-year time frame. You have all of these different revolutions happening, oftentimes happening for very similar reasons, sometimes unique reasons, but to generalize it, the reasons for these wars are as follows. The first reason for the Spanish colonies to break away is because they're influenced by other revolutions. They are influenced by the French Revolution. They're influenced by the Haitian Revolution, by the American Revolution, and even by the Mexican Revolution. They catch this revolutionary fervor and begin to break away. A lot of the criollos and a lot of the more learned generals really are all about the Enlightenment ideals, and they begin to follow through on these Enlightenment ideals and push them through. The harsh caste system is also a reason for this war, especially because of the Peninsulares having total control. The Spanish and the Portuguese governments are very stifling to the people. And so this, especially if you look at Mexico, a lot of these Spanish, South American colonies are going to have this same system where they get rid of the Spanish crown, but still the nobility up top, the landed gentry are still going to be in charge. But at least now the Spanish government can't tell them what to do. Another one of these reasons why you see the war that's a lot more localized to the different colonies is because Spanish soldiers were very, very harsh to colonists. Spanish soldiers were especially harsh to anyone of mixed blood. They were told to treat them as less than, and so they would often clash with colonists. And once people were like, join with me and we'll get rid of the Spanish, we'll get rid of the Spanish soldiers, colonists were all for that. They really hated the Spanish soldiers, and they felt that they were abusive, lazy, and didn't really care about anyone but themselves. And so they were very happy to join against the Spanish. And then also the weakening of the Iberian empires, the weakening of Spain, the weakening of Portugal led to people in in South America um, um, to really see this as an opportunity, just like Iturbide sees this as an opportunity for Mexico to be free from Spain. A lot of the leaders of the South American wars for independence saw this as an opportunity. Leaders such as Simón Bolívar. Simón Bolivar was the leader of revolutions in Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and the aptly named Bolivia, which he named after himself, because he was a humble man in that regard. But Simón de Bolivar was one of those great revolutionary men that just loved revolutions. He loved to fight. He loved the ideals that he espoused, and he would go from place to place, starting wars and trying to get people riled up to fight with him. And he moved from place to place. He never really stayed still. He, the story goes that he witnessed Napoleon's coronation, the grand coronation that made him emperor, and he wanted to emulate that glory, but he didn't want to emulate what Napoleon did with that power. He wanted to be the people's Napoleon, a Napoleon that would come through and basically tell these people, you're free now. Look what I've done for you. I have given you your freedom. He had a bit of an ego. I'm not going to lie. You have to have a bit of an ego to name a country after yourself. And so he wanted to have that glory that Napoleon did, but he also believed in the ideals of the Enlightenment, and he launched independence movements for a lot of these countries. Unfortunately, most of the times that he would fight, he wouldn't be there to set up the governments afterwards. He would just sort of leave. He would just sort of, okay, you guys are good here. You guys know what to do, right? No, well, whatever. And he would move to the next place. And then he would never really stick around. And so even though he launched these independence movies, he never nurtured them. And in the end, towards the end of his life, he has accomplished a lot and given himself a lot of glory, but none of these nations really last long under a democratic system. Some of them don't even last, at all under a democratic system. You have a lot of them reverting to sort of military dictatorships. And you see a lot of that in South America. Even to this day, there is this idea of democratic ideals that are sort of hidden underneath this military spirit. So a lot of the generalissimos that we're going to be looking at throughout the next few weeks and in the course of human history over the next few hundred years, you're going to see that it doesn't always play well for South America. And if Simón Bolivar had maybe helped one or two nations and helped set up strong democratic governments, maybe you would see something different in South America. But as it is, South America becomes ripe for military dictatorships because they are born under military revolutions as opposed to growing from the ground up. So I apologize for having so little on this part. I had more that I had, but technical issues. So we'll go ahead and leave it there. We'll go ahead and end class. Next week should go by a lot smoother. I believe I'm gonna start with this computer. We got through the 2 hours. That a lot easier now. So like I said, I'll go ahead and say it again. So it's on the recording. What I'll do is I'll set up a Zoom meeting right now, and it'll be out there. And if I do have to cancel class, I will let you know on Wednesday morning whether or not I have to cancel class. It's family comes before everything. You have to take care of family, especially in this time right now where there's just so much uncertainty and everything. So, everyone take care of yourselves, take care of your families. I'll have everything up. If I don't get it, the assignments up tonight, I'll get them up by tomorrow and get them out there. Like I said, I've graded all your papers, graded your first exam, and I'm starting to go through the discussions and add my comments into those. So you guys are doing excellent. Thank you for putting up with everything, and I will, fingers crossed, see you all next week. Okay. Thank you,
Have a
guys.
great night.
Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you. Bye.
Harry, I'll talk to you right after class. Thank you, everyone.